Welcome back to Telltale Books. This is number 3 in our Robert A. Heinlein series. The third story that... What?
Number 3.
Oh, I thought you
Just
were
being fancy.
trying to signal me that because I did forget to say, I'm Greg.
I'm Emily. No, that's fine.
Okay.
I'm not super stickler about that.
I don't care if you know who I am.
Yeah. We just want you to know the book.
Exactly. That's
Or
what's
short
important.
story.
Robert A. Heinlein is what's important. This is his third work. It wasn't professionally published. It was called, it's more recently called Successful Operation.
Mm-hmm.
The original title of it was Heil.
Oh, that makes sense.
Both titles make sense when you read it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was originally published in a fanzine. If you're not familiar with fanzines, the science fiction fantasy genre since the 1930s has had the science fiction fans choose to try to produce their own little magazines on their own. And they didn't have big publishers backing them. They were just
Independently.
basically, a lot of them
doing
were
stuff.
mimeographed, if you know what that was. Very cheaply produced by hand at home in their basements or garages. And they did it purely for love. They didn't make money off of these things.
And the zine movement is still popular in the maker tradition today. A lot of bookmakers and stuff make their own small zines with their own poetry and essays and stuff in it, or just photography zines, things like that. So it's still pretty popular.
Yeah, and a lot of the greatest authors either got their start or chose to contribute to fanzines at some time. Ray Bradbury is one that's very notable for, not only did he start writing for fanzines, but he was publishing his own fanzines in the late 30s, early 40s. And I think this one was one of Bradbury's magazines. It's called Future Fantasia.
Ooh.
And this story appeared in it in the spring 1940 issue. And Heinlein published it under his pseudonym that he used sometimes back then of Lyle Monroe. So, synopsis.
The synopsis is really interesting. So a dictator has a very diseased, what is it, pineal gland or whatever?
I can't remember.
Yeah, some kind of
Needing
gland in his
operation.
brain. So he needs to have brain surgery. And unfortunately, the only really good brain surgeon doctor is in a concentration camp.
Yep.
So he takes some convincing, but he eventually decides, yes, you're right. I do need to call this best doctor, even though I think he deserves to be in a concentration camp to conduct this surgery. And so the prisoner doctor comes up with terms, seeing that he has some leverage because he really is a lot more valuable than they even realize. So he's kind of sets some terms, to try and get him and his family out of the country, so that after the surgery is done, they can live as refugees somewhere else. So of course the dictator and he have a quick back and forth, and he agrees to all the terms and stuff, thinking, okay, well, we can swindle him later. And so the operation is conducted successfully with another concentration camp prisoner who has donated his pineal gland or whatever it's called. And so he basically, the brain surgeon swaps.
Spoiler alert.
Thank you. Basically swaps brains. So when the dictator wakes up, he's actually the prisoner.
In a concentration camp.
In a concentration camp.
And of course, nobody believes that when he says he's the Fuhrer.
Yeah. And this short story, at least in the version that Greg had me read, is about 5 pages long. This is really quick, very short, but remarkably detailed for how short it is.
Yeah. Well, a really good author can put a lot into 2 to 5 pages.
Yes, and a really great mind
brilliant
can even
story.
run further with it when reading it. So it's a really great read for that. Very interesting concept. I loved the twist.
And of course,
It's obviously Nazis and Hitler. Like,
Yeah.
it's very obvious. But they're just not naming names. Kind of thing.
No, they do call him the Fuhrer.
They call him
And
the
the
Fuhrer
story
and the
was
leader.
originally
yeah.
titled Heil, so
Yeah.
nobody had any illusions about
doubts.
what Heinlein was talking about.
Yeah. So,
But of course, they lost, so we can make all the fun of of the Nazis that we want to.
Yes. So yeah, it was a really great short story. I'll let you go on
Okay.
with what you thought of it.
Yeah, it was a it's a little story, and it's kind of incidental, and it is very much a part of American culture of World War II. Even though in 1940 we weren't technically in the war yet, Pearl Harbor had yet to happen, and we weren't over in Europe yet. We were just watching our allies fight and get their butts kicked. But we were, what's the word I want? We were sympathetic to countries like Britain and France that were being invaded by the Nazis, and we did not like the Nazis.
Mm-hmm.
So of course, someone like Heinlein would not have any problem writing such a political short story that made fun of the Nazis,
Mm-hmm.
because everybody in America was, you know, very much anti-Nazi and anti-German even at this point.
Yeah. Not to say that we were all the way from the beginning. It was after Hitler was put into power that we started realizing the dictatorship he was building, and then we
Yeah.
started hating the Nazis. At first, Americans were actually quite supportive of Hitler because it seemed like he was actually going to be good for Germany. And at the time,
Well,
too,
but in the 1936 Olympics, I believe it was, we sent a black American to kick their butt in the Olympics.
Yeah.
And he did it.
Yeah.
And that was a point of pride.
And we knew he
that
would. Yeah.
You know, the Nazis were strutting around talking about the master race, and we sent this black guy over to beat the crap out of them.
And he did it.
And they didn't like that.
No, of course not. Of course they didn't. But we also were big supporters of eugenics prior to realizing how corrupted the process was.
Yeah,
before
I mean,
that.
eugenics was a difficult subject because it did become twisted. In the beginning, people just wanted to find a way to keep people from being born with really crippling disabilities.
Yes, and they were putting it also through the lens of keeping diversity in race. So, like, if we didn't want genetics, yeah, that's how they framed it anyway. It's like, if we didn't want genetics to cross over into, like, everybody just being this monochromatic race, and we wanted to keep diversity, people would have to marry within their own race. And that would just be that's just the way it had to be. So that's the lens that they had put it through to try and make it more appealing to the public and seem more innocent. But unfortunately, Nazi Germany and even in America, there were some more sinister agendas at hand that ended up undermining a lot of that and integrating it into a more, well, I guess just fueling the fire for racism.
Yeah, because even before and during World War II, even with all of the propaganda that we had against the Nazis, there were a lot of Americans that were anti-Semites, and they openly spoke against people that the Nazis later on then tried to wipe off the face of the earth. So, I mean, in a way, we were being hypocrites.
Yes. And we are all human, so it's not surprising.
Yeah.
Nobody's perfect, and unfortunately that does cause
And it doesn't
bad
go,
ideas to perpetuate.
It doesn't go away. There's always
No.
going to be some group that
Want to oppress another.
other people are going to want to put down. I don't think you're ever going to end it. It's part of our nature for certain people to want things to be homogenous their way, and not have to deal with people that disagree with them or look different from them.
So, of course, in the context of this particular short story, you can understand how jarring it would be to be the Fuhrer and waking up in a Jew's body.
Yeah.
Much less the already controversial topic, which would probably have been swept under the rug anyway in this circumstance and denied left and right, of having a Jew's pineal gland in your brain.
Yeah.
Like, that would be a big deal in and of itself, much less waking up and you're not even yourself anymore.
Well, especially back then, the idea of a transplant from somebody from another race was very abhorrent to a lot of people. You know, if they would have had a black man's kidney put in their body, they would have huge problems with that in 1940.
Yep. So,
even if it did save their life.
yes. So, I mean, there's a lot to unpack just in that point, just in the twist alone. Much less the things that you can unpack in the story about the political corruption, where even though this doctor knew his worth and had set these terms, there was already a plan in the Fuhrer's brain to undermine it.
Yeah.
And to have things work out in his way. So, not being a man of his word in the first place.
But Heinlein wasn't being at all controversial. I mean,
he was already perpetuating things we were feeling.
There was a
public.
song on the radio that went envy Heil right into Führer's face. So, I mean, Americans were already very anti-Hitler and anti-Nazi and just making jokes right and left about the Nazis.
Not knowing
so
what. And I think,
just
too, we
in.
didn't even know how heinous all their bullshit was by that point
No,
either.
they,
and they were
they
already
didn't know
were
how
unlikable.
bad the concentration camps until the soldiers finally beat the front back to where they were liberating Jewish people and seeing the state that they were in.
Yeah.
And then opening up the gas chambers and mass graves and seeing the reality of what was going on.
Yeah. And honestly,
we knew bad things were going on, but we didn't know all
and
the
a
details.
lot of it didn't even get publicized until, what's it called? The trial that they had.
Oh, Nuremberg?
Yeah, the Nuremberg trials.
Yeah.
So the public didn't even know a lot of what was really going on. I mean, they got glimpses of it, but the whole world finally found out everything that was happening because of the Nuremberg trials.
Yeah.
So there's still a lot to unpack.
So, interesting that Heinlein had to publish this in a fanzine. It was maybe a little over the edge for the regular magazines.
It's a little political.
And they didn't want to go quite that far. Even though, like I say, songs on the radio did.
Yeah. What can you do, though?
But he wrote it and he published it. In that time, would not have been very controversial. Everybody would have just thought it was really funny.
Yeah.
And ironic. And it's not one of Heinlein's best stories, but it is worth reading if you can find it. I have it I took the dust cover off for reading, but this is Robert Heinlein's Expanded Universe, published by Bain Books in the 1980s. It's a collection of stories that didn't make it into the Pass-Through Tomorrow, and some that did. An excellent collection of Heinlein's work that I would, if you love Heinlein, you definitely need to get a copy and read it. You can get them pretty cheap on used sources like Abe Books online, eBay, and good condition. That's what this is. I used to have a paperback of it. Now, more recently, I replaced that with a nice hardcover that I got used. Unfortunately, a lot of these are not currently being published new. Like the Pass-Through Tomorrow, you can't buy a new copy of that.
Bummer.
Yeah, it is. I think it's because Heinlein's widow has all of his works published as the Virginia collection. Virginia Heinlein is her name.
Okay.
And so for about $2,000, you can get this entire
library
of everything Heinlein wrote from her venture. And that'll include all this stuff.
Actually, do we know how much he's published? Because, $2,000 for the entire collection may not be a terrible price.
It really isn't.
Price per volume.
I think it's 40-some books in the collection.
Okay.
Some are more than one thing in one volume, but I think it's 30 or 40 volumes, and they're all nice hardcovers. It's not really a bad collection, and especially when you realize it's all going to support his widow. Not a terrible thing. It's not like being published by Random House or Penguin or Tor.
Yeah, and it's someone who is already, I'm sure she's probably very I'm struggling with a stroke here or something.
I don't know how much she needs the money. Yeah, I don't know how
go.
much she needs the money. I mean, there's probably enough royalties rolling in that she's comfortable. But, like I say, it isn't being offered by big publishers. It's being offered by her, his widow. And they look like beautiful books. But the unfortunate thing is you can't buy just one volume. If you want to pass through tomorrow, you have to buy that whole collection, or you have to buy a used edition of the Pass Through Tomorrow because it's not available new anymore. That's what I don't like about it. It would be nice if you could buy individual volumes from that Heinlein. collection.
You might actually make more money that way too.
I don't know. There'd be some books that wouldn't sell at all. That's
Mhm.
the problem with it.
You never know though.
You know, you'd probably be selling Starship Troopers and A Stranger in a Strange Land
That's
hand
true.
over fist as fast as you can roll them off the presses.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, this was Heinlein number 3, and we move on next to Requiem, which was published in a major magazine, Astounding Stories, in I believe 1940. And it's just a short story, but it's back into his past through tomorrow future history.
Mm-hmm.
And so that'll be our next Heinlein video.
So join us for that one. Thanks for joining us for this one. Like, subscribe. We'll see you
And
next. Oh yeah, and
our new venture for 2023, our Patreon
yes.
page. It's $10 for membership, but you'll
get a
be
lot of
getting
extras.
you'll be getting early access to all of our videos. You'll be getting videos that won't be appearing on YouTube. You'll be getting other reviews, poetry readings, access to merchandise,
Lives.
live shows, and anything else that our brains and budgets can produce for you will be available by subscribing to our Patreon.
So
and links down below and at the end of this video, so you can go there. I would the money that we make from it is going to be put back in towards publishing our first book, which we're still working on and deciding on.
Yes. We have quite a long list of books we would like to do.
Yeah, but
so,
she's got one, I've got a different one.
and we still are
We're going to have
working
a
our
mud
way
fight
through
and
it.
fight it out.
Yeah, with our
And
our
we'll
day
broadcast
jobs
that live.
also. Yeah, with our day jobs also keeping us from our labor of love and all those other things and life events that have been, in the way. So
Yes.
bear with us, and we just want you to know that we appreciate those who have been with us a long time, and we appreciate all of you who are new subscribers. So thank you for joining us. We're really excited about this. And we hope that you join us on Patreon too to get all those exclusive and then some. So thank you so much,
I think
guys.
we're going to keep the Heinlein videos on YouTube.
Heinlein, we're going to keep
we'll
on
be
here.
able to see these as we do them.
Yeah, so you won't miss out on anything on the Heinlein series that we're working on it because it's switched to Patreon. We aren't going to do a bait and switch on anybody. We've made sure that anything we've started, we will see to completion on here, and then we'll find new things to start exclusively for YouTube and things exclusively for Patreon. So, I shouldn't say exclusively because everything on YouTube's going on Patreon, but you know what I mean. You get it.
Okay.
So, thanks for joining us, guys. We will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.